Hey, She Slayers, and welcome to another episode of She Slays Today podcast. I am your host, Dr. Lauryn Brunswick. So next week is a really big deal. I mean, it's kind of a big deal. It's episode number 250. Wouldn't it be funny if you wouldn't think it's funny. I wouldn't think it's funny either. This is actually a pet peeve. If I was like, next week's a big one. I'm not going to tell you why. Stay tuned for 4 or 5 more days. And then I was like, it's episode 250. Just in case you haven't been listening for long enough or following along, it is a pet peeve when I'll see clinics be like, tomorrow's a big surprise, like stay tuned. And then it's like, we're now open Fridays. And it's like, okay, well, that is kind of exciting, but like, it wasn't like you're giving away free puppies or anything like that. Or, I don't know. We all have our things, right? We all have our things that for whatever reason get under our skin. And more than likely, like if we were to like therapize each other, it probably is like this mirror reflection of like something that we used to do that we find really cringy now, or I don't know. But I think that some of the like weird pet peeves that we have, somebody smarter than me could definitely dissect and go like, that's a weird one. That's a weird one. Okay, so vulnerability time. I don't know. I haven't had therapy in a while, so you guys are going to be it. Don't worry. I have plans I didn't cancel therapy. It's just so I said, I think I've been doing really good. And so I've gone out a month the last 2 times and whoa, have they been months. So like you go into therapy and you're like, all right, I have like 4 major things we need to talk about. How do I, but then also like one of the things was major 3 weeks ago. And so then it's like weird bringing it back up. You're like, well, I cried a lot about this, but I actually feel like I'm in a good place now. So I don't know, for those of you that do once a month therapy, maybe you can relate. So I went to UAC last weekend, Ultimate Achievers Club. Don't judge the name, okay? Like we're going to refer to it as UAC. But my friend Elise Rigney has been trying to get me to go for a while, and like the timing just didn't work out, and like divine timing, it worked out. It was wonderful. Holy cow, amazing people. But it was really weird being the smallest fish in a group of chiropractors. Like that's just, I haven't been in that seat for a long time, pretty much for the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah, since about like 2018, like I was one of the biggest fish in the room, and that like validated my ego and all that stuff. And so it was very interesting to be in that room. And like my ego was like doing all this checks of like, ooh, I'm uncomfortable. But I was like, oh, but actually, this is kind of nice because it allowed for the space for me to be vulnerable about like issues that I'm meeting in businesses and like I'm stuck on. Whereas previously, I might not have felt as safe talking about an area that I hadn't worked out, right? Like you kind of know that that's, again, you may or may not know this, but like this is one of my pet peeves about people on stages is that it's much more comfortable for them to talk about something that they overcame a couple years ago. I used to deal with this, but now I have solved it and I'm an expert. And I don't like that. But lo and behold, I kind of found myself in that situation in other chiropractic groups and stuff. So anyway, so it was good. That wasn't even the point of being vulnerable. This is just the prelude. And so there were some chiros there that have very large Instagram followings, hundreds of thousands. And some of them, like one of the accounts has, I don't know, 300,000. And when they were guests on the podcast, it was like 20,000. And like another one, kind of a similar thing of like when someone was on the podcast, they had, 10,000, 15,000, and now like 450,000. And I'm an Enneagram 3. So it made me jealous. Like, and like I was like nice to them. And it wasn't like I was like weird with them. It was all like an internal thing. And it like kind of has lingered since I came home, and just like going down this rabbit hole of just like, I'm not doing enough. And my friend Morgan would actually say that's your human design, even more than your Enneagram 3, of just not doing enough. I'm a Manny Jenny, and I can be feeling doing enough. But then as soon as I see someone else who is doing more, because I mean, they have more of a focus. They have figured out more of a strategy to their Instagram, and obviously it's working. And so it just kind of like stimulates, strikes a nerve in me that's like, huh. And what's hard, I mean, all things are hard and good that are worth working through, but like my niche is subluxation based chiropractors. We got some rehab folks in there. It's all right. We let you in. I see you back pain spine rehab of Florida. That's not a real handle, I don't think. We let you in. You know you're a closet subluxation freak. But I have consciously made decisions with the Instagram account to keep it chiropractic. There have been multiple reels that have gone, they're usually me adjusting. And I don't even know why I post them anymore. I don't know. Anytime that I post me adjusting someone, it just goes wild, like hundreds of thousands. And I usually delete it before it gets into millions. And so like one of the things that I'll do is I'll observe the followers that are coming in. And in the beginning, it's great because I'll find new chiros are finding me all the time. And that's awesome. But then when it starts being like 500 people a day, those aren't chiropractors anymore. Those are just lay people. And when I look at like, what is the goal? So like I'm monetizing my Instagram. Okay. So like my goal, I'm there. Yeah. Now, am I monetizing it as much as I could be? No, who knows what'll happen with it in the future. I don't know if it'll stay chiropractic. I don't know. Right now, I really love serving chiropractors. And right now, my headspace is that if I started to broaden, what I brought into CEOs, but I feel like there's so much information that I haven't even started giving back to associates. Like I have this whole kind of vision of how I can help support associates staying in great associate jobs and not feeling like they're missing out on a whole component of leadership training and financial investment. And like, there's just so much still to happen, but there's really no solving this. It's just kind of sharing like one of those things where I felt imposter syndrome multiple times this past weekend. And it's just interesting to see how it still shows up. And how you think you're going to get to a certain point and you're this big fish in this room, and then you leave that room and then you go into another room and you're like, oh my God, I am worthless. What I am doing is so small on what I could be doing and all of that. And like what it comes down to, I guess for all of us, when you feel that, is just feeling like, are you incongruent with what your heart and mission is telling you to do right now? And that's where my head gets like, well, one day I might. And it's like, yeah, cool, Lauren. One day you might. You're 37. My God, so much time left. Hopefully, knock on wood. But like for now, I feel very good about the decisions I make. But then like Enneagram 3 in me is like, but I need to make sure I tell everybody that I could. Oh my God. Like sometimes, do you ever just disgust yourself? Like, do you ever just have so much self-awareness and reflection that like you see things that you say or do and you're just like, oh my God, you're so transparent. You're so transparent in like why you needed to like tell everybody like, hey, I could be viral if I wanted to. So yeah, guess I'll keep going to therapy, and I guess you guys will just keep on getting episodes like we had. Oh, you guys loved Nona Javid's episode. I got so much good feedback on that. So I'll just keep doing therapy episodes. Today's not one of those, by the way, but like, don't worry. I will just keep sharing my journey with you. So today, we have a very cool person on. So his name is Dr. Stanton Hom, and we touch on it in his interview, kind of his, like, he reminds me of like a Ben Tapper. Go back to episode 200. Ben Tapper was on, kind of one of these like warriors in our profession, these people who really stand for truth, or bringing awareness to just kind of the stuff that's going on, the stuff that's happening in society. He has a podcast called Future Generations. I highly recommend you go check it out. But he is a devoted husband and father to two great, amazing children. He's a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. following a meritorious, I don't know what that word means. Meritorious. Merits. All right. Merit is the root word. So like, does that mean, we're going to look that up. Oh, okay. So meritorious means deserving reward or praise. All right, cool. I found a new word to use. Okay, so following a meritorious military career, Dr. Stan graduated from the Southern California University of Health Sciences, Los Angeles College of Chiropractic in 2010, and has since served the San Diego community with excellent chiropractic care. He specializes in the whole family from preconception through birth, infants, childhood, and beyond. We get into some shit. So like, I will remind you guys, you remember when we had the mushroom lady on, the microdosing psilocybin lady? This is a safe place. Like, I am a libertarian and I believe in like people having a platform to talk about their truths and their this and that. And so like, I don't know. I haven't had anybody on that's gotten like real crazy where I was like, oh, should I? But like, no. So like, this is a place we go down some rabbit holes and we have some very cool conversations that I don't think are happening out there. And that's one of the things I promised you is not to like, so how do you, I couldn't think of a cheesy question. But I want real questions with real people so we can all continue to grow. So let's breathe, relax your jaw. Dear God, thank you so much for people like Dr. Stan who are putting themselves out there. So many of us are so afraid. So, I mean, if somebody budged in front of me and pushed a kid down, I don't know, I'd be like, ooh, awkward. Like, just help us continue to be brave in whatever you've put in our heart. Continue to do it through a line or lane of respectfulness of other humans, love of your word and your truth, the truth of just loving others and serving others. And just every episode help us grab, let this be a conduit for whatever information people need to hear, and let us continue to go serve and just continue to push me. I give you, I grant permission to like show me the hard things. And a prayer I have said so many times, my shortest prayer that I will say to God over and over when I'm dealing with things like FOMO and comparison is, God, make it obvious. Just make it obvious that I can know I'm not going to miss out on an opportunity that was truly made for me. If I don't go to that training or I say no to that email because I'm having boundaries, like, God, just please let me know that if it is truly for me, it will circle back. And that is not just the good things, but the bad things. And those lessons, if I don't learn that lesson, I trust that you will bring it back around. And so, God, just continue to make our opportunities and lessons obvious for all of us so we can continue being better humans. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, without further ado, here is my episode with Dr. Stanton Hom. Enjoy. So you had been in practice 2020. How many years at that point?
2020 was 10 years.
Okay. So what prompted you to start the podcast? Well, I mean, because you kind of got big on social media. That's a funny way to put it. So like what kind of happened first?
The idea for the podcast happened first, and it happened first because we just started to see what was going down. I think it was maybe October 2019. And I was just like,
oh, you saw it going down 2019?
Smells like tyranny. Well, I was just, because you started to see it, right? We started to hear, oh, there's this weird virus. And then people are like laying on the street and all this media stuff. And you're like, whoa, like what? And then you hear a report that there are 38,000 people every day flying to the United States with no like shutting down of flights long before we did any sort of stopping of anything or caring about it in the United States. And then if you're in practice long enough, right, 10 years at the time, like you're just like, when shit's going down in your practice, and when people are getting
I'm just
things,
gonna blame that because you're in California, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So I'm just going to blame my ignorance that I had no fucking idea.
Yeah.
Like,
a lot of people didn't.
Literally, it was like, because Kirby and I were going to go to Morocco in
the fall of 2020. And I remember like March being like, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to be able to go, but let's cross our fingers. So I'm in Northwoods, Wisconsin. So I'm just going to say that you were in California and you had access to more knowledge. So I don't sound naive. So anyways, keep going.
So yeah, I mean, in if I were to rewind, right, 2015 was SB 277. That's when they got rid of personal belief and religious exemption here in California to go to public or private school. So anything other than homeschool, people are like, whoa, like, how do we do this? And we're like, you can't. And there's no way that there's around it. And I was going to Sacramento and I was kind of in the weeds with a lot of the activism back then. And then you start to see like what happens in state governments like ours, where they literally change the panels of voters to stack the deck for their favor, knowing that when you go up there, like this is one of the more amazing things that I love about this kind of movement for human freedom, is like for both SB 277, which was 2015, SB 276, which was 2018, where they got rid of medical exemptions. You go to the Capitol and there's thousands of people. Like the entire Capitol building is wall-to-wall people. And the people are moms, mostly moms, multi-generational families, multiple cultural backgrounds, and it's just all families, right? And you're just like, whoa, like nobody likes this vaccine thing, right? Like that's really interesting. And then you go and you testify, which you can't say anything, but you just say, I'm against this bill, blah, 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 right? But in the line, right, because they would put on one side of the hall those that are against these bills, and on the other side of the hall, those that are for these bills. And it's like 2,000 to 1, right? The ratio is drastically in the favor of people that just don't want mandatory stuff. And on the other side are like white coats. And it says UCLA medical student, right? And you're like, what are you here for? They're like, oh, they just try, because you're just open, nobody knows who's who. You just have a conversation. And I have a conversation with somebody who's going to be a pediatrician resident. And I just start like just dropping Socratic questions. And they're just like, wait a minute, that's not on my talking points. Wait a minute. I didn't know that there were no studies. I didn't know, I didn't know there was no liability. And you're like, wait a minute, why are you here? Oh, they just offered a free trip to come support this bill. And so there's like white coats, no families, no general pop, right? No mom and dads, no kids, no baby carriers, no grandmas, all students, all doctors, all paid to be there. But it's 2,000 to 1, those that are for human freedom. And this is leading up to 2020, right? And so as soon as it starts going down, and my team was like, hey, like this is happening. I'm like, this is dumb. Like this is so dumb. It's a lie, And they're just like, wait, no, it's different because people are really scared. And I was like, oh shit, like I got to get out in front of this. Like I have to, like, so we created a Facebook group, and I had to really think about how I was going to communicate, because the majority of our patients were already understanding that we're in this movement for health freedom and informed consent.
And so you were kind of like, this
I was already in the movement. Yeah.
Patients were not surprised. So you didn't have to worry about like, oh no, is my community going to see me in a different light? And
yes and no, because we would do vaccine workshops, and there would be, I would say, some seasons 50-50. Some seasons would be 75-25 of people that were like, hey, I want to know more information. On our intake forms, we always ask if people want more information. And pre-2020, people were like, they might leave it blank. They might not want to be judged. Post-2020 was like everybody was questioning everything. But I would say I had to be really conscious because of the diversity of my practice. Like there were those that were like me that are so neck deep in the movement and so neck deep in the truth. And then there are people who are just like on the first bridge, right? They're crossing their first bridge. They're like, wait a minute, antibiotics for viral infections. Why did they even recommend that? And you're like, well, let's talk about that, And then that's like the gateway, right? You know those gateways to more empowered parents. And so we're experts in all of those, to the point of 2020, which was like, I interviewed Sherry Tenpenny, I want to say in the first maybe lead or like first round of like pre-recorded interviews. And she came back like 2 years and was like, hey, so by the way, she's on the mic and it's our third live event. We had 2,000 people there. She's like, I just want to talk about Dr. Stan for a second because you interviewed me like 2 years ago and you were nervous as hell. I was like, oh, you knew I was nervous? And she's like, oh, yeah, you were so nervous. And you're like, but she was the one that was like dropping, it's not about like, it's not even about a shot. It's about data. It's about that we're tracking people's choices, that we're actually, data mining not only their scrolling, but now they're data mining what apparently is part of this kind of shot bioweapon deal. And she was the first one where I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much bigger. And then it opened my whole kind of world to understanding that not only is it like a shot and all the things that we may be trained in as chiropractors, just teaching people about informed consent and about, how to raise healthy kids. But it's like, ooh, it's school curriculums. Oh, wow. Interesting. Like there's so many layers. It's 24-hour surveillance. Wait a minute. You have a Ring camera? That's weird. Because they own this, it's like all the things that kind of come around. But it started with a Facebook group. And I started with guard your mind, guard your heart, guard your soul and your kids from the tsunami wave of fear and anxiety that's about to come.
Okay.
And it came. And it was just fear, fear, fear. Everything is terrible. You're going to die at some point, and we're going to save you, and
so with your own podcast, unless you're Rogan, they really don't probably care about like, okay, we could say anything on this podcast and they're going to be like, okay, we don't care. But on Facebook, and Instagram, they really care. So as you started to get momentum, I would imagine with that came people in the group for the wrong reasons, but also some censorship. So first of all, how did you set up the boundaries of the Facebook group to be very like, it's okay, like just get out of here if you're not with us? Or, like how did you have those boundaries? Or was it just like delete and block, delete and block, delete and block?
The Facebook group was actually just purely for patients.
Okay.
And so we were actually screening them and then they could invite someone specifically, but it was mainly me taking my crew and giving them as big of a hug as possible. And then just saying, hey, I don't know what's coming, but I'm going to share with you the things that I think are relevant and things that might kind of lead you to a different perspective than what's being promulgated on, the screens and the media. And I am also just always open to conversation, criticism, feedback, and that was it, And so we didn't really safeguard it as much as we just knew who our patients were. And largely, I'll say this too because it's kind of important because we had multiple practitioners in our office at the time. We had a naturopath who was really in the movement for kind of vaccine choice, and we had an acupuncturist, and we had a couple doulas, and it was an interesting dynamic because the acupuncturist, she did an internship with me, and so I kind of groomed her into a lot of our perspectives. But the naturopath I thought was radically interesting because she was just like, one day she would come up to me like, masks are the law, like you need to be wearing them. I'm like, no, they're not. I don't know how to have this conversation right now with you because I know what you believe. I know what you believe. And you're coming at me with the whole mask deal. And I said, here's what's going to happen. We, as an office, and you can choose to stay if you want or not, we're not going to accommodate the most fearful. We are going to accommodate to those that actually believe in their own self-healing, their own innate intelligence, and we're going to start there. If your patients are fearful, then you are welcome to set up any accommodation you want to outside of my office, but inside my office, this is the way that we're going to do it because I know what you believe. And I said, the second rule is that no patients will ever approach each other. They will go through you and they will go through me, and then we'll have a one-on-one conversation about what the potential controversy is. There's no disrespect. There's no shame. There's none of that. And we did really well for about 3 months, and then she left. And so it was first and foremost, like our brand is very character-based. It's one of our, we call them the 6 C's. Our first C is character. And you just got to be a good person, like, and we saw that kind of go to the wayside with 2020. But after that, it was mostly just like, we're open to what the truth is, and we're going to tell the truth as much as we can. And that started very, very, very soon. The podcast started largely because in California, we just didn't know what was going to happen. Like, could you practice? Could you not practice? Would you have to do a Zoom adjustment? Like all sorts of weird shit that they were coming up with. And we were just like, let's start the podcast because the truth needs to be told. I know there are people that I can lean on as far as getting me versions of the truth. And if it all goes to hell and I can't practice anymore, at least I'll have that as a vehicle to do something, Right. And so the podcast was started around mid 2020 by, I want to say October, November. Devin Vrana had done her big deal. Like she did one of her big first events. And I interviewed her and Joe. And I said, like, tell me what's up. Like, tell me what you did. And I'm super inspired by it. Thank you for
She's one of my favorite humans.
Well, then she like goes, you're it. If you feel at all called to do it, you got to do it. And I was like, wow, that's really weird. Cause I was thinking how long did you have? We had 5 weeks to prepare. I was like, yeah, we have 6. She's like, do it. And so we did our first live event in the December of 2020. And we thought we were going to get a couple hundred people. It took us forever to find a venue. We ended up finding an old news station that's run by a Russian dude that, we just met him kind of on a whim. And he goes like, hey, what are you guys going to do here? And we're like, he's like, well, I mean, are you guys just going to talk about how Bill Gates is like running all the bullshit out there? And I was like, do you want to speak? No. And anyways, he basically was like, hey, I'm friendly. This is a compound. We have security. Your event's going to be protected. And we thought we were going to get a couple hundred people. And I think we sold 800 tickets. And I think we had standing room only because 1,100 people showed up. And it was cool because we had like Dell and we had Nurse Aaron, we had Alex Zek, Melissa Floyd, a couple others, but we had some people in the crowd, which is awesome. Judy Mikovits was in the crowd wearing like a hat. She looked like a, witness protection, like she was undercover or something. And
who's Judy Mikovits?
Judy Mikovits is the one of the researchers that highlighted. She was highlighted in. Did you ever watch any of the Plandemic series? Mm-hmm. So there was Plandemic 1 that talked about like the Fauci discrepancy and HIV long before there was a COVID. And then Plandemic 2 was with a couple of the other kind of influencers that talked about what happened with COVID and the patenting of the viruses before before COVID-19, right? The patenting the COVID virus before there was a pandemic. Anyways, she's just one of the main researchers that definitely has been one of the most outspoken for consent. Yeah.
So you have this event and you're kind of all of a sudden on people's radar, like in a much bigger way. So what do you do with that then? Like kind of this, I don't want to like fluff your ego too much here, but like kind of this like overnight fame where all of a sudden these big names that you had known because you had been, and also I just want to defend myself. I realized a big reason being in Wisconsin, we still have all 3, knock on wood. So I, out of ignorance, have not had to really follow a lot of this. Like it is true of like, I'm just up in my state being like, well, my kids haven't had a single vaccine and go to school, honey. But
it's beautiful.
Like, it is beautiful. But like, as you were going like, oh yeah, no, I can see how you had to start going to things like that. But okay. So you're this overnight, you want to move to Wisconsin? Like it's great up here. There's cows, grass-fed
I
beef,
love
very
Wisconsin.
easy.
And I love the Wisconsin chiropractors, man. There are so many good chiropractors in Wisconsin. So
okay, so you're overnight and now all of a sudden you're on people's radar. Like you were before and you're on people whose radar you want to be with. And I'm sure you're all of a sudden now on people's radar that you do not necessarily wish to be on their radar. So I would love to hear just kind of your journey with censorship, especially in the beginning. Because like I know to this day, if I try and share something of yours on stories, Instagram, well, first of all, they double asked if I really wanted to follow you, which I thought was like, oh, this is interesting. And then if I try and share something of yours, they will say, are you sure? Are you sure you want to share this? Because he's a big fat liar and we don't like him. So for someone who's like on radars, talk to me about the censorship you've experienced.
So I think by January, I got deplatformed the first time.
And by deplatformed, Instagram?
Completely pulled off of Instagram.
Okay.
Like deleted
But
from
Facebook,
Instagram.
they still let you be there?
Facebook, I, for some reason, chose to remove the forwarding of my posts. I can't remember when it happened and why I did that, but I did. Okay. And so it's kind of interesting because you're in different ecosystems, and I'll post something on Facebook just randomly because I'm so used to just forwarding things, and all my friends will be like, what is this? Like you're an anti-vaxxer? I'm like,
do you know me?
Wait a minute, this is super weird because you don't know any of that because you don't follow me here, right?
Yeah.
And then that's one thing about deplatforming is you don't just lose your followers, you lose who you follow. And so you actually get disconnected from the people, like all the people that were my friends with my first account, like I stopped following them because I didn't know who to refollow because you just don't know how to rebuild your account. And then March was our second event, and by like a week after our second event, we were deplatformed the second time. And so I would say I have a couple thoughts around this. One is I had a beacon, right? There was in the county of San Diego, like there's something to the order of like 1,700 chiropractors, right? There's a ton. And there, if I really looked at the landscape, there was maybe 3 or 4 of us that were like really vocal about things. And one guy had an account that was like, 100 and something thousand. And I had him speak at I had him speak at my first 2 events. And I just said, well, you're my beacon, dude. Because if you're not getting shut down and they're not coming at your practice and they're not pulling your license or they're not doing this, then the bark is bigger than the bite. And I'm in for this because I don't like the spiritual warfare aimed at our children, right? That's really the mantra in my mind has always been, what is the world that my kid is going to inherit from me? And everything came from that, right? Around that same time was when I went to Devin's Big Idea, and I got to speak. And this is where we got to meet a bunch of the people that were all kind of getting deplatformed. And it was really weird because you like meet people and you're like, wow, you're a freaking nerd. Like I'm a nerd, you're a nerd. Like it was just super weird to kind of geek out with people. And I met Ben Tapper. And I don't know if you've interviewed Ben yet.
I have, yep. I think he was episode 200. He was like a monumental one.
Ben he's one of the biggest blessings I have ever met, like in human form. And at Devin's event, he just scrolled through his phone, super humble guy, and he was like, dude, check this out. And he just showed me all the ways that his phone had been hacked and all the messages that he had got as far as targeting, as far as they knew when he traveled, they slashed his tires, they did virtually like all the things that our forefathers and mothers of chiropractic received in the first years, pre-licensure and all those types of things, practicing medicine without a license, the original PSYOP, right? And I'm a veteran, and I just looked at him, I said, Ben, I want you to know, with all the minimizing words I could use, that I am devoted and I will take as many arrows as I can because I believe what you are doing for humanity, not just the profession, what you are doing for humanity is something that I'm all in for. And I have never received what he had received as far as attacks and threats. We've received our share, but when I started to see the local beacon of somebody who was doing more than I was at the time, not getting the bites from the city, from the county, from all the people, then I was like, okay, like
we can say whatever we want.
We can push
we
further.
Can do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
These are more threats than.
Yes. And when I saw Ben, I was like, it just took me full force back to just like I said, our forefathers and foremothers of chiropractic, like the people who were sent to Wisconsin, right? Do you know about Dr. Morikubo, like one of the
Mm-mm.
original cases to define chiropractic, BJ sent him in, I believe, 1906 to La Crosse,
Oh,
Wisconsin.
that's where I'm from.
So he was sent there in 1906 to practice, open a practice, knowing that he would get arrested and knowing that in that court case, they would define chiropractic as a separate and distinct profession.
Shut the fuck up.
That's
Really?
fucking crazy, right? No one
That
knows
happened
this shit, right? So when I go out and I talk about things like I don't know if you know Simon
Because in the
Senzon.
court case, they would have
Yes.
to define it. Oh, wow.
So all the attacks on chiropractic for practicing medicine without a license were because they had never defined what
as separate.
chiropractic was. And so now we look further, 100 years, and we're like, oh shit, you have licensure and they actually control you, right? It becomes like the window into the infrastructure. Like, it's like, what's better or worse, like to just get arrested all the time and attacked, for illegally practicing, quote, medicine without a license, or to then define it and be a part of the system that they then they regulate and control. It's kind of hard to decide, but that's our roots, right? Our roots are such that chiropractors were told, men and women, right? If you go to the Cleveland family, like they had more women as their four mothers of chiropractic, mostly nurses, who were fierce advocates for the principle of chiropractic. And thousands of chiropractors were arrested tens and hundreds of thousands of times up into the 70s, I believe, which is when Louisiana was the last state that was actually licensed. And in the end, it's like, here we are, in 2023, and we don't know this. Like, we don't know this as a profession, right? And so for me, what has fueled me has been that. It's like I wouldn't have a privilege to practice at all, especially in the model of principled, vitalistic, pediatric prenatal focused chiropractic, where you just literally see the life express in someone so vibrantly that you're just like, that's what they're after.
Mm-hmm.
They're after that vibrancy,
It's so difficult because, so I think just in general, you're going to have personalities that are willing to go to jail, and certain personalities.
Thank you for telling me that, because it's like, let's all go to jail.
And I'm like, go
I'm by
Stan.
myself in
I'll
fucking
send
jail.
you money in your
What an asshole.
commissary.
You're in the jail, asshole.
It's like, oh shit.
Dick.
Like I've honestly thought about that before. Anytime we talk about like chiropractors willing to go to jail, and I was like, damn, I mean, it would be a really good story for stage, but I don't think I'm tough enough. I know I'm not, because like I'm too much of, I care still too much in my life journey about being liked to be like, I'm just starting to be a little more vocal within chiropractic, let alone within the community. But anyway, so I remember being in chiropractic school. It was infectious disease at Northwestern. I have yet to get a cease and desist from them, but it's got to happen one of these days. And I forget her. Linda Bowers was teaching infectious disease, and I remember where I was in the room, and the like idea of vaccines came up, and she said, "I just don't understand why you chiropractors insist on picking vaccines as your hill to die on. Like, just stop it." And then she moved on with the class. And I was just like, girl, like I remember this. So that was my intro. And like I had known through like just doing ICPA training, like you've had Lawrence Pavelski on, like I've done that. Like I knew enough. I had read enough books to go like, I'm not vaccinating my kid when I have one eventually. But like chiropractors aren't being taught this in the schools. So then we come out into society, and I feel like we're really wanting to build a practice. And to build a practice, you need to be liked. And so, I think it's really hard as a pediatric chiropractor to step up and say, like, it's way easier. Okay, not easier. It's not true. I feel like what I can get away with on social media to like not my patients watching, I feel like is so much more than what I feel like I can get away with in my clinic. And so it's like, how for you, I feel like it was a little different just because you have different personality, but like, how do you feel like pediatric chiropractors can kind of step into this realm of having some of these difficult conversations with their patients, or just like when they're just scared that they're going to lose their patient base and they don't know what the hell they're talking about because they weren't taught.
I would say that if you don't know what you're talking about, then don't talk about it, right? And I would also say that if you don't know what you're talking about what you're talking about, but you have certain resources and beliefs, then don't do the thing that a lot of people do, which is, hey, just do your research, like this very weak, like recommendation to send people out into the wild of WebMD and Google searches.
Make sure you use DuckDuckGo.
Please, and then offer them like some of those direct resources because you have to help them. You have to assist them through now, especially the level of censorship that exists out there, right? I'll kind of give you an idea as far as how and why we kind of met some of the challenges of COVID particularly, right? Like I was pretty anti-mask from the very beginning, posted multiple times that I believe it's a gateway drug to medical tyranny. I believe it is a hill to die on for a host of reasons, but it may be not for some people, right? But I remember when my daughter came into the office and I had a buff like around my neck, and with one of the patients, they wanted me to lift it up, and I did, and my daughter like saw me like, where'd your face go? Like she was 7 months old. She didn't really understand, but I could tell that she could see an inconsistency and an incongruency and a contradiction in how we just live our lives. And it was literally the next new patient that I walked in where I would always come in with, say, my buff up or something, just assuming that somebody would be more scared. And I took it off and I just walked in. I said, hey, do you need me to wear this? And it was interesting because I had 3 general responses. One was no, and they took their mask off. That was 80-90% of the people. There was, I'm going to leave my mask on and say, no, I'm not going to force you to. And that was like maybe the remaining 10%. And the outliers were the people who were like, please keep your mask on. And then they would leave within, the friendly. They
figured out this isn't my place, right?
But it was also, just a litmus test, right? Because I know dozens of chiropractors in the county, in the state. I use my state in particular because we are all kind of a similar breeding in terms of, if you see families and you see kids, you understand the informed consent mission and battle here in California. And they didn't do that. And what I found the most revealing to me was all I had to do was ask. All I had to do was Socratically ask. And I didn't go in. And then if somebody had more conversations, I would ask about the immune system. I would ask about, hey, do you think that this, protects you, or do you think your immune system is far more important? And people would logically begin to connect some dots. And from that point on, we just made a very clear policy where we're not going to shame anyone. Like, we're not going to not welcome somebody if they're going to wear a mask. I have a patient who has been in my practice since before that office, which his twin boys are 10 now, and I saw them as newborns, and he still wears a mask like almost every day. And he's just like, what's up, dude? Like, and he doesn't care, and I don't care. And I love the guy, and I will love and serve him. And that's something that we also kind of sit back and say is like, if somebody is stuck in that belief system, do they need our care and services and love more or less? And they need it more, 100 times out of 100, because they just haven't connected those dots yet. And so it's kind of a different way to think about it, because I spoke at the ICPA member gathering some months ago because of the time warp. I don't really know when it was, and I was introduced as an angry chiropractor, as like somebody who, like, if you ever feel angry in the last 3 years, like, this is your guy. It's just like, dude, like,
did you write that bio?
No, I actually gave a bio, and I started by saying, I just want you to know that everything that I do actually stems from love, and it stems from this deep, deep, deep love that I have for humanity and I have for our kids, and I have an openness to the whole picture of love, which is, often we believe it's rainbows and puppy dogs and warm hugs and kisses, but sometimes it's a swift kick in the ass, and sometimes it's like a real like kind of gut check moment. And that's the whole picture of love. And so if you ever have thought that I'm angry, it's because I'm not afraid to access those parts of me, because I believe that what's at stake is something that is far greater than we're allowing ourselves to recognize right now. And so I would say, as chiropractors who may be at step A, right, that it's always being brave enough to ask Socratic questions, to reveal answers in people that they may not see, that their family values are here, and society, the system, whatever it is vibrating at a lower frequency. And if they don't recognize that there is a discrepancy, then they will operate as if there's no discrepancy, and they will think that it's just a level playing field, when in reality, I believe that it's our job not to say, okay, bro, you're going to force everybody to your value set. It's just, sometimes it's an increment. And it's just getting them to realize that, an adjustment to help the nervous system self-heal is far better than going to that, provider who's just going to do a therapy for torticollis, right?
Sometimes
and,
you just got to get them to wake up to even that, though, of just like dethroning their pediatrician. So you've used the phrases medical freedom and medical tyranny. To you, what is, so like pro medical freedom? And like, I would love to know what else falls under that besides being, air quotes here, an anti-vaxxer.
I would say pro medical freedom is, if you are in the world of taking care of pregnant moms, then, and you don't understand informed consent and medical freedom being almost synonymous, then I don't know what the right word is. You're not paying attention, but you're just not, you're not creating and holding a space for real like healing for the moms in your practice, right? And so I've said on more recent podcasts, just because I've been hearing it more, right? More moms are coming in, babies are still being born, and I was like, whoa, like you're all in on COVID, right? You follow me because of COVID, but you don't know that I have to ask my doctor. I don't know if my doctor will allow me. I don't know if they'll let me not do this intervention. Is the way that we lose moms generationally for how long, right? And so I would say everything in birth. I would argue that fertility, pro-medical freedom, means that you have to understand informed consent on fertility procedures that have a lot of risk. Everything with regard to pediatric healthcare and pediatric medicine, we have a really good pediatrician in our county, and I sent a ton of people to him. And one day he was like, I'm pro-vaccine, right? I'm like, yeah,
I've had that conversation with.
Yeah, bro. Like, I got it. But I walked in because my kid had like a significant like bout with impetigo. And, you read all the things and it's like, this is kind of at the edge of what I'm comfortable with in my scope. However, everything that I'm doing seems to be helping and I'm seeing progress, but let's talk to this dude, and he comes in, or I go into his office. It's the middle of COVID. He's wearing a mask. We take our masks off and he doesn't care. I'm like, interesting data point. Yep. And he was like, I think I'm going to write you a prescription for antibiotics. And I kind of interrupted him. I said, what would Rady Children's Hospital do? And he's like, well, they probably would have already admitted her and they probably would already have a line in and they would already like be scaring the shit out of you that she's going to die. I said, okay, so I see those discrepancies. And I said, this is what we're doing. And this is her progress. And when do you think the antibiotic, like if I do the antibiotics that you're recommending, when do you think she's going to actually start to see real progress? This was a Friday. I'm off on Fridays, so I always know when my kids' appointments are, like today, which is why I asked you to reschedule. He's like, probably by Monday. I was like, okay, I think based on what I'm doing, she's going to be better by Sunday, like Sunday morning. He's like, then don't do the antibiotics. I was like, cool, right? And so we don't have those providers anymore. Like he is a great white buffalo.
Yeah, we really don't. They're not allowed to like think.
Yeah. And so what we have is a ton of marketing. And so 99% of patients would have gone straight to Rady Children's Hospital. They would have been admitted. They would have had a line in. And I wanted to have that understanding because he doesn't stand for that. But I also don't stand for what he does. But I'm open to the idea that I may not know everything. And I may, give myself and my family and my wife peace of mind by offering a new perspective. And I think that's medical freedom, right? is actually in that
Being able
moment.
to have a goddamn conversation with somebody
That's
who
it.
might know a little more about something than you.
Yes.
And them not barking down your throat for asking a question. Like, I just feel obviously, I don't, when did it start coming out? Like a year ago was when it really became super public, these vaccine incentives that pediatricians are getting. And it's just like screenshots from Blue Cross Blue Shield's website, just like shared. And I shared it and I was just like, I have not fact checked this. I don't know if this is made up or whatever, but like the shoe fits. The shoe fits because in 13 years in practice, I've had patients go to their family practice doc, their pediatrician, and they pre-appointment in the early days. I would be like, no, it's okay. Just let them know you want to wait a little bit. Just tell them. And then they'd come back and they'd be like, I didn't even get the words out of my mouth. And they threw research at me and said, like, not at this clinic. And I was just like, what? And so, yeah. So this is kind of the medical tyranny part where I was imagining you were going with that of just like these parents. So now I literally need to prep them the best I can in a high volume practice of, and it's usually like, yeah, well, she's got her shots next week. And I'm like, how do you feel about that? Well, I'm scared to do it. And I'll be like, this is optional, right? Well, I know, but I don't want her to get sick. And so it's like you've had these conversations, right? And you just kind of walking through them. And when they get to the point with a patient where I think they're like, I think I might just wait or whatever. Then I have to have a whole nother conversation of like, I want you to be prepared for how that doctor may react. Here's why. I don't know if it's necessary for me to tell them why, because like already at this point, they're just getting like downloaded all this information of like, oh my gosh, someone who I'm allowed to do that. And then like, yeah. And then they might yell at you, just so you know, this person whose opinion you trust so much to keep your baby alive, they're going to yell at you possibly. And it's because a lot of money is on the line and the hospital has like specific policies about whether or not you're allowed to be this or that.
I would say medical tyranny is gaslighting, right? Like the form of like they appeal to authority, the logical fallacy that I know more than you, the CDC knows more than you, that I'm going to rob you of a logical, normal conversation that any human would be, expecting. And I would say that that's really tough, right? It's tough for parents to navigate right now because we have infrastructural, institutionalized gaslighting and medical tyranny that has been completely normalized, paraded, and celebrated, that it's hard for people to recognize that it's even happening sometimes because they're just in that tsunami wave, And so those are generally my definitions of each, right? I would say informed consent is really, really, really foundational, whether you look at it through the Hippocratic Oath or you look at it through the Nuremberg Code. Like talking to any provider about risks and benefits, alternatives, and what if I wait and do nothing is just a normal conversation to have with them. And so I would say
they
that
wouldn't get pissed if you were asking questions about blood pressure medications. Like that's
no.
the thing is like, it just gets so emotional so fast of just like, if you were like, well, if they said like, Lauren, you've got high blood pressure. We're recommending whatever the hell they put people on for high blood pressure. And I said like, okay, would it be dangerous for me to try 6 months of healing this naturally? And what would you recommend for that? I feel like they'd be like, well, diet, exercise, but most people fail. So you're probably going to be back here in 6 months, but they'd still like, but yet when it comes to vaccines, more so than anything else, like, you could talk about like, oh, we've removed dairy. And they're like, oh, okay, that's fine. That's cute. Like, oh, we're trying pediatric chiropractic. Oh, that's cute. That's great. Okay, sure. But it's still just so much on this in this one area of pharmaceuticals.
And every way that I've analyzed it, it actually just comes down to liability. That's all it is no one's liable, right? The pharmaceutical industry isn't liable. Like the 1986 Act gave them immunity from any sort of like adverse reactions. Doctors aren't liable. Insurance companies aren't liable. Hospital systems aren't liable. Nurses aren't liable. No one's liable, right? And the politicians aren't liable. And so that's what happened with COVID, exactly, right? In a sense that your kid's teacher that was forcing things on your kid is not liable. The administrator, not liable. The district, not liable. No one is liable. And because of that, it is this renegade gaslighting, this renegade like lockstep, you fall in line 100% compliance is the expectation, right? Mm-hmm. And then when they have the censorship and the social media companies to back it up, then it's a homogenized worldview and it's this subset of people. But now it's different. I believe that now people know like that the winter of death and destruction or whatever that we were all bestowed upon by Biden. It's like, oh, well, like actually all of us are actually healthier than the people that were forced into that thing. And, you know, there's actually people who are really like dying suddenly. It's super weird. Like before we used to have like, raise your hand if you know someone that has cancer, right? And everyone raise their hand. You're like, oh, chronic disease is the killer, right? And now if you go into any speech, if I go into any speech and I say, raise your hand if you know someone who's been injured or killed by the shot, and everybody freaking raises their hand. And we're still the a-hole, right? Mm-hmm. I'm still the guy that's too angry. It's like, dude, no, we aren't accessing this nearly enough, because what's happening now is we have kids that are coming in, because it was before too, right? Like I understand the perfect storm. I'm a PX guy. I love, you know, I think I was first introduced to you through Epic, and like the perspectives of understanding that the environment is destroying our kids' nervous systems is not arguable. But when you look at it today, it's like the depth, the width, and the breadth of it is crazy. Like California is nuts, like literally nuts, in a sense that like it's not just shots in the medical system, it's also public school and the curriculums. It's also like all sorts of different perspectives that is the mental, what I've been saying, mental, physical, spiritual enslavement of our children. And that's something that we see front and center so much in California. No one's, you know, people used to say, oh, everybody follows California. No one's following California anymore. Like all the Midwest states especially are just like, you guys are nuts and you guys are idiots, you know, like we're not going to follow you guys off the cliff, you know, but
literally
off the cliff, New York and, you know, California. But I've been saying for a long time that you show me a state legislature, because we found this out in San Diego. The guy who just got kicked out of the county supervisorship, he is one of the young and up and comers of the World Economic Forum in the San Diego County Board of Supervisors. The World Economic Forum, the globalists, have infiltrated the youth in the movement for legislative and politics, that they're grooming them from that young to become Newsom, right? To become those kind of leaders.
Yeah. So talk about the school curriculum. Like I want to kind of dig more into the mental, physical, spiritual. So like, obviously, okay, we all agree. Yep. I get the physical aspect of the vaccines but like,
how far down that road do you want to go? And I'll say this because in San Diego, it's especially controversial since I've been in practice. Like we've been in practice around the same time, right? I've been embedded in the birthing community since, you know, for the last decade or so, right? And I remember when one of my patients started an amazing podcast for moms, that when I got interviewed, I didn't realize that this was happening, but I kept saying pregnant moms and she kept correcting me saying pregnant people. She kept saying birthing person. She kept saying different different inclusive, air quotes, words. And so I don't know if that's a route that you want to go down on this podcast per se, but it's crazy.
Ironically,
right?
I'm trying to think of when this is going to air, but like there's another episode that's going to air right around this that we don't worry.
So I have been in this movement for a long enough time, meaning in the movement for birth, right? In San Diego, like there are a few names that have been around as long as I have, that have been just networking and building relationships and just holding space, creating space for moms in this journey of like sacred journey of birth and from maiden to mother, and being the only dude sometimes in a room of 50 women. I'm like, hey guys, I'm here. And they're like, thank you for being here, you know? And I got that for so long. But then at some point I started to realize, I was like, I can't say mom. And that is what is normal in our curriculums here in California is things like critical race theory and things like LGBT, where I have some of my patients who were very and have been very active in the medical freedom movement for a long period of time, that they started to see that from a curriculum perspective, that they were just getting the books, the mandatory recommended readings or library books, and they were seeing pornography. They were seeing words that we wouldn't feel comfortable reading in emails back and forth that were recommended readings for like 12-year-olds. Like literally like about...
But to what end? Like why? I mean, and also I've read The Real Anthony Fauci, so like, but like, why? What's the point in doing this to the kids?
So this is hard, and it's hard because I didn't make this connection. Andy Kaufman helped me make this connection. Andy Kaufman is one of the maybe more vocal medical doctors who is promulgating like terrain theory, just letting you know that, hey, it's not just a germ theory, it's terrain theory, right? He started there, and he was like, Stan, do you know why it's a transhumanistic movement, right? I'm like, well, yeah, the gene therapy, right? They're changing our genes, and it's called transhumanism. So when you move into, it's like for me, I am a co-godparent with a lesbian couple that I absolutely adore and will literally raise my niece side by side with because I love them deeply. But when you go LGBT, it's different. And that's what Andy Kaufman said. He's like, trans is actually from a hormonal perspective, right? Because it's not just, and this may be controversial, but you're maybe the same generation as me. It's like, remember Pat from Saturday Night Live?
Yes.
Pat, right?
It wasn't SNL. Wasn't it Mad TV?
No, it was SNL before
sure?
Mad TV. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, yeah, I thought Pat and like always wondering what bathroom Pat was going to go in. I swear that was Mad TV, but you could be wrong. We could be wrong.
So back then it was just Pat, right? And it was like, I don't know, guy or girl, but I'm going to be respectful and I'm going to be, and now it's pushed, it's in Target, right? It's in our kids, it's in their curriculum. Mm-hmm. And then, have you ever seen that documentary, What is a Woman?
Mm-mm.
So that was put out by a more conservative group called The Daily Wire. The journalist actually, in my view, was just setting out to like understand this community, like what was happening. And when it comes to the hormone blockers and when it comes to the transition surgeries, how much does pharma make per patient?
Oh God, I have no idea.
1.4 million.
Per patient.
Per patient, per transition, over the lifetime, right? Mm-hmm. What is the current population of trans people?
I don't know.
1.3 million. That's $1.8 trillion. And so this is something I didn't know. And I promise, I'm sorry, listeners, if I'm like, if I'm like took you too far, because I don't love doing it if you're not ready, if that's not what you're expecting. But fucking medical tyranny. That you can't have,
so I have a question.
Like your children.
In your opinion, do you think, so like, okay, there's a part of me that goes like, okay, I understand why it's important for us to teach kids that there's going to be people different than them, and that's okay. So we're just going to take that and we're going to put it on the shelf and like be like, yep, okay, we get that. Are you implying, or in your opinion, do you think that our genetics are getting accidentally fucked up from the terrain? And like big pharma's just like riding that wave of being like, yeah. Or do you think it was like, do you think our hormones are intentionally being disrupted to create a problem they solve?
So I would say I started practice believing that conventional medicine was stupid. Like I was like, you guys just don't know what health is, right? And largely, I think that's true, right? But I believe political medicine, which I don't know if you know and have thought about the difference, right? Conventional medicine and clinical medicine means like, hey, I could talk to that pediatrician and be like, hey, bro, like you tell me your thing, I do my thing. What do you think? Oh, what do you
Right.
think? It's
You said they have a
collegial,
virus, yet you said you were
right?
going to write me a prescription for antibiotics. What's up with that? I don't get it.
But political medicine is, I think it birthed chiropractic in a sense. The AMA in the Wook case was one of the first highlightings of the extension of the Flexner report, of the installment of Rockefeller medicine, which is largely driven by the wealthy elite. I came through COVID recognized, like, I think it was maybe within the first 3 or 4 months where I was like, ooh, oh God, this sucks. Oh man, they know all of it. They know all of it, because I used to think they're so ignorant. They don't know the body heals itself. You know, they don't know that chiropractic adjustments like help neuro self-regulation. You know, like I used to think that I was so ignorant to think that. And then I started, I was like, whoa, like this is why we're public enemy number one. This is why we're still the main exit outside of the system, but the main target from most of, like, every 3 or 4 years, Self magazine is going to come out about chiropractic and stroke, right? Like those are psychological operations. Those aren't real. We put resources. We try to prove ourselves because we obviously don't cause stroke, and we have to tell them academically that we don't cause stroke. But, you know, it's because they own that kind of cultural authority. And what I've realized is that because once censorship hit, so this maybe is a roundabout question to how, like, I navigate censorship. Is once censorship hit, we knew, like, the people who were speaking out the most, we knew exactly when we hit it. Like, we knew exactly when, because we could watch our analytics. I can't see my analytics anymore like I used to.
It's almost like you can see when you, like, when your post went viral, where you're like, oh wow, it's different. Like
it's completely different, right?
You knew when you became on their radar.
By spring 21, I interviewed a woman named Tiffany Parado. Tiffany Parado is still one of the foremost. I highly, highly recommend you interview her. She's one of the first to get deplatformed, but she was one of the first to, on a big level, just say, dude, something's happened to women's cycles from the shot and from some sort of transmitting or shedding from the shot. She's published 2 research articles on this now because she has thousands of survey. Like she is IRB approved. She's PubMed indexed. She has some of the best scientists actually on her back, like actually promoting her research. But when I saw her get pulled off, and I saw my friend Echo and Afraid get kind of really, really, really shadow banned, I was like, we started to predict where and how they were navigating censorship. And censorship was, like, it used to be follow the money. Pharma makes all the money. Follow the money, right? Oh, pharma and, Bayer owns Monsanto. Weird. That's weird. No, it's not weird. No, it's not weird. Bayer is a pharmaceutical company from the Holocaust, and they bought Monsanto because they literally are in bed, right? They bought them for $60 billion. Do you know this? Like, they bought them for $60 billion.
You're blowing my mind right now.
Bobby Kennedy at CalJam says, I have a court case. I will win it if you guys donate $250K. Chiropractors, Billy D, one of my favorite people on the planet, raises $500K for Bobby Kennedy. He hires 2 lawyers, and in months, there's 3 major court cases against Monsanto, where I think the first was several million, and the next 2 cases were in the billions. Bayer bought them for $60 billion. Bayer lost $60 billion in their overall, like, stock, profile. And we don't see that they're all one and the same. We think, they're a herbicide, fungicide, pesticide. It's actually classified like glyphosate is classified as an antibiotic. They're a pharmaceutical company. They make aspirin, don't they? Bayer makes aspirin. But they're behind all of these kind of industries, but there are people behind them, right? And the people behind them, I believe, are so radically intelligent. And I think that the orchestration of what they pulled off in COVID, I believe they didn't do a great job of it, but it revealed where it was follow the money. Then it became follow the control, because you started to see it, like legislation would come down, right? Like the reason why I'm vocal about curriculums and trans and targeting our kids is because in the state of California, there have been multiple bills in the last year, very current, that are, if a parent doesn't affirm their child's gender, that child may be removed from their home. That is
Wow.
California today.
So by you
Right.
say affirm their gender, meaning like I will accept what my child chooses their gender to be. Is that what you're saying?
So I'm going to say it this way because this is very real in a patient and also in a colleague who's one of the top lawyers in this movement for truth, where their kid got punished because for bullying because another child in their group identifies as a cat.
Oh, yep. Yep. We
Right?
actually have that in our
And
small town. I just found out
so
about this like 2 months ago, that this is a real.
so that's what's happening as far as administrators are punishing children, and all they said was like, are we going to get rabies or something? Like, it was kind of just a funny joke, you know, that I think most kids would navigate, but it was bullying. But that's what it is the affirmation of your child's whatever it is that they have become to believe about what their identity is. If it is not affirmed, that you may be deemed as an unfit parent in the state of California. And it's gnarly, man. It's gnarly to think that that is the normalcy that these people are promoting. And I don't believe you can be like, hey, we're in Wisconsin. We don't really do that shit. That I believe.
Yeah, we legit do. We legit do. Like I said, I just found out a month ago, our town is 9,000 people. Our county is 45,000 people. And I found out that one of our school districts has a room with a litter box in it for a kid. And I was like, you're fucking kidding me.
No fucking way. No
Like,
fucking way.
No, we are red up here. We wouldn't allow that. We, like what? No, that's California shit. Like,
So
that's
why?
not.
Right? Why?
Yeah. So why?
So why it is because it is the weaponization of inclusivity, is the weaponize of forced empathy and forced compassion that plays to the human heart, right? Because, well, who are you to say?
What will they do with that? What will they do with that if we're all super inclusive and empathetic to everyone's truth? What? How does it?
It means that you can be owned. It means that's why, you know, things like we're all in this together then becomes a version of shame, right? Where I have friends that are in my old friend group where I'm in line at a coffee shop, like on Facebook, like I'm in line at a coffee shop and somebody's not wearing a mask. Oh, I shame them. You know, like I gave it to them, and it just becomes this way to divide and polarize. And if we're divided and polarized, then we can be owned. There's no unification. There's no possibility of real togetherness. And it's promulgated, right? It's promoted as, well, do you not believe in gay marriage? It's like, no, that's not what we're actually talking about. I didn't know that it was going to be like a full-on dude swimming against my daughter one day, right? Like that's fucking weird, you know? Like, you're going to tell me that if I don't believe in gay marriage, that my child is going to have to swim against dudes, then I might just think about things a little bit more differently.
Right.
If
Don't pretend that
going,
those are the same. You know? Like, it's the forcing into dualistic thinking of you're either for it or against it. And it's like, is that really what we're doing here?
So I'm sorry if that's not where we were going to go into the conversation, but I will say that the more that I kind of peel the layer of the onion or look behind the curtain, the more I realize how like orchestrated and how actually intricate and somewhat like I read a book mid 2020, was gifted by, you know, an old team member of mine. It was called B 2.0. Beyond Entrepreneurship. Is written by the dude who wrote Good to Great. Can't remember his name right now. But it goes through how, you know, these companies who are like standing the test of time in terms of legacy have what they call 100-year visions, where they, at their inception, had such a strong vision for their future that they crafted a 100-year, a century-long vision. And I believe we're seeing that because one of them was Merck. And I was like, well, fucking A, right? Like you read it, you're like,
yeah, if you're a pharmaceutical company, what does your 100-year vision look like? Like, you know, like we don't need to go there now, but like
it's
you could use your imagination. You can use your imagination. Like, it's not that the average person is on less than one pharmaceutical. Like that's not going to be the 100-year vision of a pharmaceutical company.
I remember early on in practice, Jin Tempo would just, like the most eloquent, like philosophically sound perspective of chiropractic, right? Like the only way that the future of healthcare exists is if we inspire our patients over time to need us less, to be so radically empowered that we work ourselves out of the job. I thought that was one of the most beautiful ways to like say, like, yeah, dude, we don't want to see you 3 times a week forever, but I do want to see you forever. And you do need a healthy spine forever. And you do need a healthy nervous system navigating this world forever. And I'd love to be that person forever. And maybe the people that I delegate to is you're going to help me, with all the different avenues of like, I'm not going to do that at 100 years old, but maybe I will because just for bragging rights. But the point is,
after you get out of jail,
political medicine, bro. Like political medicine is, we don't want you on one, we want you on all for all foreseeable generations. We know, and this is not my research, that the industry at the time before 2020 was for vaccines was some 60 billion, but the side effects and the fallouts was some 500 billion. This is Bobby Kennedy's research before there was a 2020. What is that now, man? Like it is absolutely insane.
The side effects is an additional 500 billion.
It's tenfold, right? And so they know that on the front end, they're going to make that sale. They're going to market that shit to the end because they have no liability for anything that they put out, zero, right? But the fallout, the chronic disease, the autoimmunity, the Lyme, all the things that we're like, ooh, this is a functional medicine trend now. It's like that wouldn't exist if we didn't have the onslaught of the original, in my opinion, the original sin is this level of intrusion into our system, like the sanctity of our blood, Tim O'Shea's book, sanctity of our blood violated. And so I say it this way, like, and this is where we are, right? We have kids who are birthed at home. We have kids who are adjusted since birth. We have kids who are totally unvaccinated right now, and they have chronic illness. And some families are like, thank you for saying that, because they're saying there are no unvaccinated autistic kids. There are. And we see them, right? And they may not be, quote, diagnosed with autism, but we're like, there is a neuro dysregulation here that is very, very significant. And then we think about 5G, and we think about chemtrails, and we think about all these things, and we're like, there's like, what the hell is the way out, right?
Mm-hmm. You can really feel very hopeless.
And so I interviewed a guy named Joel Salatin recently, and I've been really into the regenerative farming dudes, which is why I love Wisconsin, right? I love even standard process, right? Like, and I was like, what do you do about chemtrails? What do you do about like the water, And he goes, well, and EMFs. He's like, yeah, these are really, really important things. He's like, I've never seen an animal sensitive to EMFs. Like he just started to like kind of go through that. If you raise animals regeneratively, that they don't express the bullshit that domesticated humans do, right? And he said something so sobering to me, because he started his farm, I want to say he's in his 60s. I think it's some 30-something years, where it started with weeds. And he remembers, he told the story of one red clover sprig coming out. He was like, we're going to win. He saw life happen in a desolate farm, and he knew that he was going to just redo it, like rinse and repeat this regenerative perspective. And now he has some thousands heads of cattle, right?
Well, sorry, what do you mean by regenerative process? What are you talking about there with regenerative farming?
So sorry, I'm covering like a lot of different topics.
No.
So organic, right? People are like, oh, get organic, and that's better. It's far better. It's far better than conventional farming, right? Because of GMOs and because of glyphosate and because of all the things, right?
Right.
But you could buy an organic label, but at least you can know that it's not going to have toxins, right? And the farmers that I met here in San Diego, they highlighted the difference between organic farming, sustainable farming, and regenerative farming. And regenerative farming is the highest level of soil management, of how you actually create an ecosystem that is actually symbiotic, where the animals influence the plants and the plants
and
influence
the soil
animals, and the soil and the mycelium layers and the humic and fulvic minerals that we put in bottles and supplement. Like there are people in that movement that are so convicted. And he said, because we went through the kids' health, and he knew more about kids' health than most chiropractors could actually say on an hour interview. And he just stopped at one moment. He's like, Dr. Stan, do you know what my vet bill is? I was like, dude, tell me your vet bill. He's like, 0. I was like, 1,000 head of cattle, tens of thousands of other animals over 30 years. And he said, outside of a birth that I need a little bit of assistance, my animals don't touch that industry at all. And so why is that
profitable
important?
for his local vet.
Not for his local vet, but the point of that is that, and I'm a chestnut guy, right? James Chestnut, like his whole perspective of like toxicity and deficiency versus purity and sufficiency, that because we know more than most providers do about the toxic and the deficient nature of our current world and how it affects our children and affects our moms and our future generations. And we also know what normal is. We know what normal expression of life and normal and optimal expression of human potential is in a pure and a sufficient model that we have and have had the answers from our inception. And it's why we're public enemy number 1. And so it can get so claustrophobic and like, there's no way out. It's like, in the end, he was like, my farm isn't like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres. My farm is actually a small family farm that I've invested in for 30 years, over and over and over. We went from 2 or 3 heads of cattle to thousands of animals, and his vet bill is virtually nothing because he's believed in that regenerative principle of understanding that if we live innately, that we will express our innate potential in a way that we don't even know anymore, right? And like, if you follow Weston Price, have you heard of Weston Price, Weston A. Price, and his perspectives? There's a woman I also would suggest you interview. Her name is Mary Ruddick, and she's like a modern day Weston Price. And so when I interviewed her like a year ago, she was just like, yeah, I just got back from Iceland. It's seal season there. And she's just like, kind of goes through like how, like from fertility and pregnancy, she's like, they don't have hunter-gatherer and fisher tribes. They don't have words for depression. They don't say like, I need space, right? Like my nephew is 2 and he's like, he falls and he's like, I need space. And you're like that reaction is largely a domesticated human, that our innate like way of expressing our genome and our genetic potential just doesn't actually have, And so in the end, it's an interesting dynamic because there are models of what this life can look like. Does it mean that we go live in the bush? Does it mean that we go eat, what our cows eat?
Right.
No. It just means that we don't realize how strongly prepared we are to understand what that model for optimal potential is for a real-time self-healing of chronic things that we have in our lives and our family tree now. But if we invest in those and we, dare I say, brainwash, our like communities into recognizing that, obviously not forcing and shaming and coercing, that the outcome is vastly different than we could ever even fully like fathom. I don't think we even know what the truest human potential is.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of chiropractors that are still waking up. I mean, myself included, in like, of just going like, huh. I'm a chiropractor, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that history lesson. I didn't follow. I didn't know that person wrote that check. I didn't know that person owned that. And like, so I think that the continual waking up is needs to happen. What's next for you? Like, where do you go with this? Are you going to keep building the podcast and trying to bigger reach, or what do you do?
Well, in about 30 days, I get to work with this incredible woman.
Shit, it's on me to figure out what's.
No, because that would be
We're gonna
contradictory.
figure this
Right?
out.
That would be contradictory to what I actually believe, right? Honestly, I believe that we are at like future generations is at a point where the ability to scale the message to the end user, right, to our families is really, really important. We filmed a curriculum. It's kind of beta testing right now. I'll share a link with you if that's something that you'd love to share with your peeps. But basically it goes through a 3-month like process of understanding like the fundamentals and the foundations to this innate lifestyle, right? But the second month is really like dismantling some of these old belief systems that we don't actually realize our psychological operations from the powers that be. And then the third is like, how do we then install these belief systems that are going to prepare not only us as parents and doctors, but our children to understand not only what they're made of, right? They're made of this miraculous force of nature, of God, that honestly most people minimize. And how do we make that robust? How do we continually create a radical, transformation, for our communities? And it's something that I'm really, really passionate about, because in the end, it was, what is the world that my kids are going to inherit from me? It's become what kids is the world going to inherit from me, right? Like what kids am I going to bring into those future generations, whether they're in my own family tree or if they're in those that find us in our practice.
I love that. Okay, final question. Where can people find more of you?
It's really hard. Thefuturegen.com is our podcast website. Future Generations SD is our clinic here in San Diego. And on Instagram, I would say you're going to get a few, roadblocks, but at Dr. Stanton Hom is probably the most current place to find me.
Yeah. You find the current one that hasn't been shut down and restarted. So
yeah.
Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Dr. Lloyd. Sorry if I went,
No, like question 17
roads,
of like, what is the point of this is why I'm like, I have the first 3 questions usually. And then I'm like, all right, let's see where this goes. This is fun. I always love telling my guests, like, this is a safe space because, I don't know who's gonna really get upset with us.
And in my world, I've gotten to a point where I've seen enough, and I've seen it just destroy kids. I've seen the industry and the powers that be destroy like the human potential that we believe is in all of our kids. And because of that, I don't care if it's safe or not. I can't not speak what I'm called to speak.
And I think that unfortunately, I think a lot of chiropractors would agree, like, hey, I love, I'm all full of love, but it takes getting a little angry. It takes getting a little angry to go, oh, now I'm going to do something a little different and kind of step out of our little ring of comfort. So thank you so much. She Slayers, we'll have those links for you below. Go follow Dr. Hom, listen to his podcast. He's got some amazing guests on there. Leave a review so we can help just continue bringing more awareness to the parents, because I so agree. I used to think it was like, if I can just educate the providers, then they can tell their patients to do chiropractic. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, they fucking know. We have to go straight to the parents, like, because we're never, if we continue this route of, we need hour 2 where we can talk about like how a majority of our chiropractic schools are still sucking up the ass of conventional medicine and like trying to like get in their approval, and like why we have so many chiros that are like, oh, I didn't know that. So part 2.
I have a lot to say about that. I'm very well versed in chiropractic academia too. So whenever you want to do that, I'm ready.
Sounds good. All right, She Slayers. Until next week. Bye.